Yes, UniFi supports OSPF, kind of. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to configure OSPF on a UniFi Dream Machine router. But before you go turning your Dream Machine into an enterprise core router, there's some things you're going to want to know. There's a few catches, and I'm here to make sure you don't fall on your face first. Hey guys, welcome back to Tech Logic Lounge, where you and I figure out how to make tech make more sense.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
And in this video, I'm going to show you how to configure OSPF on a router using the GUI. I'm going to explain how Ubiquiti handles OSPF behind the scenes. And it's actually using Linux. And I'm going to show you how to verify everything is working in the CLI of the UniFi Dream Machine. I'm also going to give you some insight on some potential issues that you could run into because I ran into them, and I don't want you guys to be spending hours like I did troubleshooting. But let's stop rambling and actually go ahead and get into it. All right, so I'm going to show you a quick diagram of what we're working with here, just so you can easily follow along and understand what I'm doing. So we've got our lab here, and I've got my UniFi router over here on the left, and I've got a pfSense firewall that I'll be using to configure OSPF with my UniFi router. In the middle here, we've got a link. The network that's connecting the two is 10.1.100.0/24, and we're going to give .1 to the UniFi router and .254 to the pfSense. And these are just an example of some of the different networks we're going to be sharing between the two with OSPF. Now we're just using a single area here. If you're not really familiar with multiple areas, don't worry about it, but this is how I'm going to configure it. But if you had other sites as well, you can configure something like this, where maybe you've got a third device over here and you want it to be in its own area, so we could give it area 5, and then you would have your UniFi set up as an area border router, and you could be filtering and summarizing routes as needed. That's a little bit more advanced, something you can do, but we're not doing it in this one. I just want to show you how a setup could look like based off of what you're doing. But for now, we are just sticking with this. We're going to be configuring OSPF between two devices, and this is the network that's going to connect them. And these are some of the networks that we're going to be sharing. All right, so you're going to log into your UniFi router, and you're going to be at the dashboard, and you're going to want to navigate to settings. Then you're going to go to routing, and then OSPF. Now, your first thing you're gonna have to do is give this thing a router ID. This is just essentially the address that uniquely identifies the router, essentially like a name. You can give it technically whatever you want, just make sure that no two devices have the same router ID, and just make sure you're able to easily identify it. For me, I'm just gonna use the IP address assigned to the UniFi router that connects this to the pfSense. So 10.1.100.1, which you can see was right here. I'm just gonna use that same IP address. You don't have to, but I am, just because it makes it easier for me to remember. Then, hey guys, quick note, make sure you drop a comment down below and subscribe. When I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'll be giving a Raspberry Pi 5 away. I appreciate your support, but let's go ahead and get back to the video. We're gonna go ahead and click areas. And you have to, for your first area, you're gonna have to create an area 0, that's the backbone area. And I'm only doing one area anyway, so 0.0.0.0 for area 0. You're gonna leave it normal. And then we're going to go ahead and select some of the networks that we want to participate in OSPF. You're going to have to include the interface that's connected between the two devices that are going to be communicating over OSPF. So for me, that was that link UniFi PF 10.1.100.0. So whatever link is connecting your two OSPF devices, you want to make sure you have that selected. And then you can select whatever other interfaces that you plan on sharing to the other OSPF neighbors. So I'm just going to do VLAN 10, 20, and 30. These are all going to get shared as well. And I'll click save. And I will click add area. So now we've got our area here. We've got several interfaces being shared in that area, and you can actually modify some of the settings here at the bottom. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll go to VLAN 10 with PC, and you can see that we can modify whether or not we want authentication on this link, what the cost is going to be. I wouldn't recommend changing any of this if you don't understand what it is. Your hello and your dead intervals, I would just leave that the same. And the one thing you can enable or disable is passive interface. And essentially, if this link doesn't have a device that's also participating in OSPF on it, you might want to just go ahead and click this. And that's so your router isn't advertising out LSAs or hello packets on this interface. And that's because there's no device connected to this interface that's going to be participating in OSPF. I only have the one interface, which is my UniFi PF interface. So that's the only one that's going to not be passive. So this one will be passive. My VLAN 20 server will be passive, and VLAN 30 will be passive. And they're all still going to be shared. All these networks are still going to be shared between the link for my pfSense and my UniFi router. It's just they're not going to be sending out unnecessary traffic to the interfaces that don't have any OSPF routers sharing networks on. Now, one of the other settings you can modify here is announce a default route. And essentially, this will, if you do have a default route, which most likely you do, which probably connects to your ISP router, that's your default gateway out of your network. You can actually announce that on OSPF so that your OSPF neighbor knows how to get to the default gateway, which just allows you to get out to the internet if they don't already have a way out. And you can redistribute static routes, which essentially, if you have any static routes, you can actually redistribute those into OSPF and share them, as well as connector routes, the same thing. I'm not doing any of that, so we'll just go ahead and click add. And from here, we're going to wait a little bit. We'll go back to OSPF. and eventually we should see our neighbors show up. This might take a minute. Took me like 20 seconds last time for it to eventually show up, so we'll give that a second.
5 minutes later.
All right, so now we've actually got a neighborship with the pfSense firewall on the other side. You should see your neighbors popping up here, assuming you set up OSPF correctly. And if you need to go back and manage OSPF, you just click on that area and you can come back in here and add and remove interfaces as needed and all that good stuff. But that's about it in here. If you go back again to routing, go back to your OSPF, you can see that we have an established state with our neighbor, but we can't actually see what routes are being advertised or anything like that. Kind of sucks. I'm not sure why they didn't include any of that in the GUI. In order to see that, you actually have to SSH into your UniFi router and run some commands, and I'll show you how to do that real quick. But before you do that, you actually have to enable SSH on your router. If you already know how to do that, go ahead and skip ahead. I'll leave a little timestamp somewhere. Otherwise, I'll show you how to do that real quick. All right, so you're gonna go to control plane. You're gonna go to UDM Pro. Nah, just kidding. You're gonna go to console. Then you're gonna scroll down here. You're going to ensure SSH is checked, and if you need to set a password, you do change password right here, and then you'll obviously click to enable SSH. I've already done all that, and press continue, so you don't have to do that. But once you've done that, then you'll go ahead and open up whatever you want to use to SSH over to the device. Me, I'm just going to use PowerShell because it's installed by default in Windows, and I'm going to do SSH. You're going to use root at 10. Whatever your IP address is of your Dream Machine. You're going to enter that password that you set up just a few minutes ago, and you should be logged in. So here we go, I'm logged in now. All right, so the OSPF-D daemon is the actual process used to manage OSPF. And if you're familiar with that, it's because it's an actual Linux process. It's not proprietary to Ubiquiti. In order to confirm that that is running and your OSPF process is running on your UDM, your Dream Machine, you can just run ps aux grep OSPF-D. And we can see here that we do have the daemon running right now for OSPF, which means the process should be running. We should actually be getting OSPF services. And the router should be participating in OSPF, assuming it's configured, which is the case because we've already seen that we have a neighborship. Now, there is something you're going to also notice if you're familiar with this. The FRR service is the actual service that generally manages OSPF. However, in this case, Ubiquiti does it a little different. It has its own service, which is a UBIOS UDAPI server, and this is a Ubiquiti proprietary service, which is actually used to enable OSPF-D directly. And it actually does that via some JSON files, which can be found here. Let's type AL. You can see we've got some previous versions of this file, but what we're looking for is this one right here. And you can actually see that we have a symlink to this file over here, which is this one, if I believe correctly. So this is the active file being used. And if you actually do a cat on this, you're going to see there's a whole bunch of configurations for networking specifically for the UDM, your Dream Machine. However, if you just want to see specifically stuff for OSPF, basically the configurations that you've enabled via the GUI, you can just run this command here. And I'm not even going to try and lie to you and act like I know what it all means. This is something I pulled from ChatGPT. So here it is right here. Don't worry, I'll leave it in the description. And from here, we can actually scroll up. We can see that we've got our router ID that we configured via the GUI. We've got our area, the type of area it is, some of the networks that are being advertised via OSPF, along with the interfaces that are participating in it, our hello, our dead intervals, and whether or not the interface is passive. Got true here, false here. So you can see your configurations that are currently in that JSON file that the UBIOS UDAPI server process is using. Now, if you want to see real time what's going on, you can actually enter VTYSH, and this will put you in this FRR service process. You can actually see a lot of the same configurations related to your OSPF config. So we can do show run, and we'll actually see the running config for OSPF. It's going to look a lot like Cisco if you're familiar with it. We've got our router ID. We've got some of the networks that are being advertised, all of these of which are ones that we put into the OSPF process via the GUI. You've got some of the interfaces that are participating in it and whether or not they're passive and all that good stuff. And now we can also run show IP OSPF database to see the LSA database. We can do show IP OSPF neighbor to see the neighbor and see whether or not we have a full adjacency, if that is the case, which is what we do have, and the neighbor's ID, which is my pfSense 10.1.100.254. And we can even run show IP OSPF router. Oh, we can also run show IP OSPF database router to see the routers that are advertising via OSPF, right? If I scroll up here, I've got this router here, OSPF router with ID 10.1.100.1, which is the UniFi, and we can see some of the networks that it is advertising via OSPF. Scroll down a little bit, we can see that I've got my pfSense and what it's advertising. It's advertising this, advertising this, a few others on here. So you can use this to see what you're actually being advertised from your OSPF neighbors. You can obviously also do show IP route OSPF to see what's actually made it into the routing table via OSPF. And if you really want to get into it, we can actually get out of this. And if you want to see whether or not a device is actually advertising via OSPF, you can run this here at tcpdump. So obviously it needs to be a sudo, which means elevated privileges, tcpdump -i for interface, and you select the interface that you want to see whether or not you're receiving OSPF advertisements from. You put protocol OSPF-VB, and we'll hit enter. And now if we give it a second, we should see some of those OSPF advertisements being received and sent. There we go, I'll stop it here. So we can see here that the PF sent out an OSPF hello packet, and we can also see that the UniFi sent out some stuff as well. So this is great if you want to see if a device is actively participating in OSPF by actually seeing the traffic coming across an interface. But those are some of the primary troubleshooting commands you're probably going to use in the CLI to go ahead and check out your OSPF config and try and figure out what's going on. The biggest thing is you're probably going to be using this VTYSH shell a little bit more so that you can actually, check out what's going on. You can do question mark. You can see that there's a plethora of different commands and variations. A lot of stuff you can Google as well, just to try and help yourself identify what might be going on with your OSPF and ensure that your GUI configuration is matching up with what the OS is seeing on a sub level. But anyways, that's how you configure OSPF and verify its configuration. But let me leave you with one quick tip before you leave so you don't fall flat on your face like I did. So you're definitely going to want to be using those verification commands, especially that TCP dump on whatever interface that you intend on sending out OSPF, LSA packets, and hello packets, because one thing I noticed when I configured OSPF in the GUI and then ran that command because I wasn't getting any neighborships was the fact that the UniFi router wasn't actually sending out any packets whatsoever. And I ended up finding out as well that the OSPF-D process wasn't starting, even though I had configured OSPF in the GUI, and any of the configuration I was putting wasn't actually being pushed down to the Dream Machine Pro. Now, I tried all kinds of things. I tried restarting the UBIOS UDAPI server process for Ubiquiti. I also tried manually configuring OSPF and enabling the OSPF-D process, but I ran into issues where the GUI and the CLI would not match up. If I did it in the GUI, it wasn't actually propagating down to the CLI, and if I did my configuration in the CLI, it wouldn't replicate up to the GUI. The only way I could get it to work is by factory resetting my Dream Machine and then reapplying my backup. I don't know if it was just a bug, but as soon as I did that and then tried to configure OSPF again, it worked for me. So that might just be something that happens to me. It might not happen to you, but I don't do anything crazy with my Dream Machine, so there shouldn't have been any reason why it really happened. But that's just a warning. You definitely are going to want to be aware of that, especially if you plan on using this in an enterprise type environment. But with that, that's all I've got. I appreciate you guys' support. Let me know if this was helpful. Drop a comment down below. Let me know what you want to do next, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.